Colleagues, it being 11 a.m., I think we'll start the meeting now. Just one quick comment before we begin. We do have another committee coming in here at 1 p.m. sharp, so we're going to try and get out of here just out of courtesy for our colleagues who will be coming behind us no later than 1. If we can adjourn slightly before that, all the better. But we'll see how things go. With us today, we have witnesses from the Treasury Board Secretariat. Brian Pagan, who's been with us many times before. Mr. Pagan, good to see you again. I understand you have an opening statement, and if you care to commence, sir, and introduce those witnesses who are with you, we'll start the meeting immediately.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be back here today with my colleagues René Lafontaine, Chief Financial Officer and Assistant Secretary, Corporate Services Sector, Mr. Daryl Sprecher, Senior Director, Expenditure Management Sector. To begin with, I'd like to give you an overview of main estimates, 2017-18 Estimates B. To begin, I'd like to briefly describe the government's expenditure cycle. Thereafter, we will look at how the supplementary estimates and main estimates are organised and look at the dollar breakdown for the whole fiscal year.
Reflect the priorities set out in the fiscal framework and in Budget 2017. Before concluding, I will also briefly talk about planned changes to estimates for 2018-19. I do have a presentation that has been made available to the committee, and that is the frame for these remarks. As you'll see in that presentation on slide 3, we depict the supply calendar for Parliament. The parliamentary calendar is organized according to 3 supply periods ending June 23rd, December 10th, and March 26th. Supplementary estimates are a normal part of the supply process, and these supplementary estimates B for the period ending December 10th present information to Parliament on the Government of Canada's spending requirements that were not sufficiently developed in time for inclusion in the main estimates that were tabled February 23rd. On slide 4, we see an overview of the way in which the supplementary estimates document is organized. The first few pages of the tabled document summarize the authorities and the amounts submitted to Parliament for their approval, and they give additional information on major items and on horizontal initiatives. As usual, the largest section of the document, of the tabled document, details requirements by department and agency. Each organization displays its requirements by vote and initiative, and we have tagged these initiatives to the appropriate budget year as applicable. For instance, initiatives from Budget 2017 are tagged as Budget 2017. The tabled document ends with the proposed schedules to the appropriation bill, which are based on amounts presented in these estimates. Additional details are also available on the online version of the document, and we have added new detail in response to feedback from committees. For example, a graphical summary has been provided or was provided for the first time in Supplementary Estimates A, and we have repeated that depiction of estimates again. When we appeared at this committee in March, Mr. McCauley asked if we could provide an Excel version of supplementary estimates, and I'm happy to report that for these supplementary estimates B, we have provided details by organization in Excel data tables on the Canada.ca website. Finally, I would remind the committee that the TBS info base is also available to provide you with more information on authorities and expenditures. As we see on slide 5, these supplementary estimates provide information on $4.5 billion in voted budgetary appropriations for 71 organizations. The new funding supports many initiatives announced in Budget 2017, as well as spending set out in prior budgets and confirmed in the fiscal framework. These estimates also provide an update on forecasted statutory spending that has previously been approved by Parliament. The $395 million increase in statutory spending reflects adjustments for public debt charges and major transfers, as well as the cost of employee benefits associated with the initiatives funded in these estimates. It also includes a new statutory transfer payment for home care and mental health services as announced in Budget 2017. Turning to slide 7, we see a summary of the major voted items, and more detail is in fact provided on page 5 of the tabled document. In these estimates, we've highlighted 8 initiatives of $100 million or more. These 8 initiatives total approximately $2.3 billion, which is slightly more than half of the voted amount in these supplementary estimates. The largest item on the list relates to compensation adjustments for the public service following the ratification of a number of collective agreements. This funding will be allocated across government departments. The next item for national defense is an aggregation of the additions and subtractions, or the pluses and minuses, for 19 capital projects, including the Arctic and offshore patrol ship and the tactical armored patrol vehicle project. The third item is also from D&D, and that reflects pay increases to Canadian Forces members. The remaining 5 major items in the list cover a wide variety of programs and initiatives, such as humanitarian assistance, public service group insurance and benefit plans, a settlement payment to follow royal assent of the Cree Nation governance legislation, fixed-wing search and rescue aircraft requirements, and a reprofile funding for the new Champlain Bridge. Turning to slide 8, we see a visual depiction or representation of the major spending themes in these supplementary estimates B. And as I mentioned, this is also available in the online version. As you can see from this slide, the largest item at $1.3 billion relates to compensation and benefits across the public service, RCMP, and Canadian Forces. Government-wide compensation and benefits represents approximately 30% of the funding to be voted by Parliament in these estimates. The second biggest item or theme is for national defense capital projects, totaling $668 million. And this is related to 4 major projects: the aggregation of the reprofiles that I spoke of, as well as fixed-wing search and rescue aircrafts and the light armored vehicle. Other major themes include support for Indigenous peoples at approximately $600 million, as well as innovation and federal bridges. Slide 9, Mr. Chair, speaks to the progress that we have made in implementing Budget 2017 initiatives. The committee will recall that Budget 2017 was tabled in March, and that is after the main estimates, which were tabled on the 23rd of February. Accordingly, supplementary estimates A, that were tabled May 11th, presented the first opportunity to bring forward new measures announced in Budget 17 for parliamentary approval. These supplementary estimates B, before you today, include 46 initiatives from Budget 2017, totaling $1 billion, or roughly 22% of the SUPS-B requirements. With these supplementary estimates B, we will have brought before Parliament approximately 76% of the spending measures in this year's budget. We would anticipate bringing forward additional funds related to Budget 2017, as well as other government priorities, in the final supplementary estimates of the fiscal year to be tabled in February. Mr. Chair, before concluding, an update on our estimates reform project. In June, a number of changes were made to the standing orders of the House of Commons, including a change to Order 81, which deals with supply. As a result of this change, interim estimates for 2018-19 will be tabled for the first time in February. This interim estimates will support the first appropriation bill of 2018-19, and then a full main estimates will be tabled on or before April 16th, which is to say after the budget, and will therefore create the possibility of including budget items in the main estimates. To bring the budget and estimates even closer together, we are working with our colleagues in finance to include information in the budget about new programs on a cash basis, And this development will support the possibility of including Budget 2018 plan spending in the main estimates document to be tabled on or before the 16th of April. As a consequence of this, we would anticipate not having a requirement for a spring supplementary estimates if in fact we're able to bring budget measures into the main estimates. Monsieur le Président, cela conclut ma présentation.
Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation. As far as next steps are concerned, the government will table its legislation in December. Then the President of the Treasury Board will table sub-estimate C for 2018, 2019 in February. Should you have any questions regarding the supplementary estimates, it would be a pleasure for me and Madame Lafontaine and Mr. Sprecher to respond to your questions.
Much, Mr. Pagan, and we'll start with our normal 7-minute round of questions with Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here with us today. Very much appreciated, as always. I just have a few questions off the top dealing with the cycle, and obviously it's changing. So I understand from your comments and from what I believe the procedure will be. In February, we'll do sub-C in February 18, under the old regime, I'll call it, for lack of a better phrase. And simultaneously, there'll be an interim for fiscal 18-19 in February as well. So we're going to, as this committee, I guess we'll have to kind of be doing those at the same time, almost a double cohort. And do you see any problem with that, any confusion that might flow from that as we adjust, adjust from the old cycle to the new cycle?
Well, thank you, Mr. Peterson. In fact, we, as you know, we've presented some ideas to this committee in terms of ways in which we can simplify and make more coherent the estimates process, and we see this development as a very positive development in terms of bringing greater clarity and coherence to what we're doing. The reality is that we have always, in the supply period ending March 26th, presented both a final SUPS for the year in which we're in and the estimates requirements for the year ahead. And the confusion that has created is not being able to do, sort out one fiscal year or another. The confusion has been we have been presenting the future year requirements in advance of the budget, and then we have had to catch up through the supply calendar with significant spending, billions and billions of dollars in supplementary estimates. So for this year, in 2018-19, we will table a supplementary estimate C that will conclude requirements of departments to deliver programs and services for this year. And the interim main estimates will simply be an extension of the existing authorities that have been approved by Parliament to this point. And so we'll flatline, if you will. If Department X has $100 million, we will take a portion of that $100 million and make that the starting point for the requirements next year. This will have the additional benefit of eliminating some confusion about what we call sunsetting program. In the past, we've used as an example Marine Atlantic. The continuation of funding has been subject to a budget decision. With the budget coming after the main estimates, we have had no choice but to table a main estimates that does not assume the continuation of that funding. And so it has been perceived as a cut or a reduction. And in fact, it was not. It was a decision not yet taken that was confirmed by the budget. So by tabling our interim estimates in this way, we will avoid any semblance of reductions. If there are to be reductions, they will clearly be articulated in the budget, and they will then be reflected in the main estimates that are tabled after the budget.
Okay, so my question is, so when we do the interims in February coming up, will that report be similar to what used to be the mains, because that's what happens before the budget, if you follow what I'm saying? So what currently in the present cycle, or the old cycle we'll call it, when you did the mains, it was before the budget. So what informed the mains? And then consequent to that, is that the same information that will be used for the interim 18-19 in February? In other words, is the interim going to be akin to what the mains used to be?
It will.
Okay.
It will. The key difference is that in the mains, we also provided a narrative explaining additions and subtractions. Because there are no additions and subtractions, because we're flatlining things that have already been approved by Parliament, reference levels that have already been approved by Parliament, we'll simply present the fraction of that. Normally we present 3/12 or 4/12 of a requirement with the narrative, the supporting detail to follow in the main estimates once those additions and subtractions have been confirmed in the budget.
Okay, so when you do the interims for 18-19, then the budget will follow, and then the mains will then follow
Correct.
the budget. So what sort of just my speculation will be that the mains going forward will be a much more informed and well-advised process because the budget will have already been tabled.
It will have two benefits for us. The first is a reconciliation to the budget. I mentioned in my opening remarks that we're working with finance to develop cash tables. The budget is presented on an accrual basis and the estimates are on cash. We're working this year so that we will have the budget projections on an accrual basis, but then the budget decisions will turn around and they will be reflected in cash terms. So Department X will get $10 million for such an initiative. Using that as a starting point for reconciliation, we would be able to replicate that table in the main estimates. So there's a very easy crosswalk, same language, same numbers. And then, again, because the budget decisions would precede the main estimate, we will have an opportunity at Treasury Board to work with departments to approve programs and have them reflected in the main estimates for parliamentary approval.
Okay, and is this why you say the spring supplementary will not be required going forward?
We anticipate that if we're successful in bringing the budget into the main estimates, that would obviate the need for a spring subs.
So do you predict there only being two supplementary periods, an A and B?
That would be our intention.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That'll help clarify things. Thank you. How much time do I have left?
Less than a minute.
Less than a minute. Perfect. Well, perfect for Kelly. I just wanted to roughly talk about, and I'm sure some of my colleagues will get into the actual additional funds that requested under the supplements here. But I like how you broke it down on the slide, and I just wonder, and I hope someone will follow up on this because I don't think I'm going to give you enough time to answer. But we look at slide 7 and you have the 8 bullets, and then I think slide 8 has, is that the same spending, just categorized in a different manner? Or is this new spending that's not on?
Slide 7, we itemize by initiative,
right.
And then on slide 8, we aggregate. So for instance, on slide 7, we see compensation adjustments for the public service at 654, and we also see compensation for Canadian Forces members at 331. That's the same theme. It's going to two different pots, but it's the same theme. And so on slide 8, we aggregate that, and we show you the impact of compensation at 1.3.
Right. So I see.
We'll have to unfortunately cut it off there. Mr. Peters, when you said you didn't think you'd give them enough time for an answer, I can assure you that, yes, I think is a
I'm right
question.
once in a while, Chair.
Mr. McCauley, 7 minutes, please.
Just somewhat following up on the theme of the labor, the 654 for the compensation, 654 million for the compensation changes. What percentage of the public service is covered by that? That's for sign between April and July. How many more do we have left to sign, and what are the ballpark financial obligations for the new ones left to be signed?
Right. So thank you, Mr. McCauley. As of these supplementary estimates B, we have reached agreement with 20 of the 27 bargaining tables. That totals 156,019 public servants, or 90% of the core public administration. There are 7 tables still outstanding, and negotiations are ongoing with those groups. That would include, for instance, border guards, correctional service officers are probably the two largest.
But it's a huge percentage of our public service.
Well,
is done.
90% is done, and 7 tables, 10% outstanding.
Right. PSAC has filed a complaint against the government with Public Service Relations Board about the missed deadlines to implement contracts. They're asking for compensation. What risk are taxpayers at for this complaint if they prove successful? And why did we not get those agreements honored?
Mr. McCauley, the situation, the challenge before us is working through implementation of the Phoenix pay system. When the
It's solely or 99% is Phoenix, that we weren't able to honor the agreements in time?
Well, Phoenix is the way in which we pay our employees, so the fact that agreements have not been implemented is
What risk are we at compensation-wise, ballpark? Are we able to guess?
I can't comment on a legal
Okay.
issue.
The $253 million for anticipated shortfalls for public insurance, is that from new benefits? Is this from additional public service workers? How did we end up with $250 million?
So, yeah, you're sort of, it has both aspects, actually.
Okay, break it down for me. How much is because of new employee or new employees? How much is new benefits?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the total of $253 million, about half of that, $126 million, is increased because of payroll. So when you increase your salaries and some of your benefits are based on the salary that you make now, that actually increases the amount of premiums that you pay for that higher level of salary. So we factor that in, and that represents about $57 million. And then we've also noted a 7% increase in the cost of health care. So that's a part of it as well, and 47 or 48 million is related to that. And the final figure is really the we've actually, the long-term disability program for senior management in the public service had a premium holiday for a while because they were actually a little ahead in terms of their planning for funding. That premium has now been put back on, and so that's increased as well. And then you net against that the increases employees are going to pay for their share of the premiums, and the total is $126 million for that. The remaining $126 million is actually a contingency that we put in for our total envelope that we use to plan for making sure that we have money in our reference levels to pay for all of these costs. And we have a 5% contingency every year, which is normal.
Thank you.
Okay.
In the subs we've got under the TBS, there's funding for web renewal initiative of $7.7 million. Can you break that down? Like, how much have we spent so far, and will that cover the whole initiative, or is that just the first go at it?
So I can do that one as well. In terms of web renewal, our total ask is $26.2 million over 6 years. What we're looking for in these supplementary estimates is the second year of the program, and it's $7.7 million.
Where are we going to get for $7.7 million?
So what are we going to get for $7.7 million? So the focus is actually this year is going to be on, we have 10 institutions have gone through our web renewal plan and have streamlined their website, making it easier to find information and to access information for the key Canadians that use it. We've added four new departments this year. So Health Canada.
And trying to bit by bit move the departments
Well, what
over?
we're focused on is the top, the kinds of services that Canadians generally, the top ones they look for
Okay,
online.
that's good.
So we're focused on 70%.
Perfect. I can move on. The $4.3 million for the Canadian Digital Service, is that, again, like the web initiative, is that just a start, or is that a be-all and end-all cost?
Yeah. So same story. The Canadian Digital Services. So Budget 17 announced a
Is
total
it going
of
through
25.
shared services or a different department doing that?
It's actually no. We're setting up Canadian Digital Services inside TBS,
Okay.
and it's going to be a key branch within our organization.
Okay. Thank you. How much time, sir?
You've got about a minute.
Oh, good. Just quickly, there's 3.7 for executive leadership development programs within TBS. I'm curious, who will exactly this be used for? Which, when you say executive, will it be department head level, DM level? And is this considered a taxable benefit if it's a training program to put someone through a specific program, an MBA, a CPA, or anything like that?
Yeah, no. Well, I'll start with there. That's a good question. No, this is training that we're going to give to our own senior managers. We're proposing to train 25 EX4s and 5s this year, and about 75 EX1s to 3s, or sorry, 50 EX1s to 3s. This will be the first year of the program.
So 75 people for 3.7 million?
Yes.
Okay. And what are we training them on for? That's a hefty price tag.
Yeah, so Treasury Board set up a pilot program. We used our own money last year, and we set up a pilot.
It's not your own money; it's taxpayers' money.
Sorry, in terms of the money that we had in our reference levels last year to set up a
But
pilot
that's
program.
$49,000 per person.
We're going to have to, even though it's a legitimate ask, Mr. McCullough, we're going to have to get the answer to that in a future intervention, because now we're going to Mr. Blakey for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning. In the estimates, there's a request for about $330 million for the Canadian Armed Forces pay increase, and I was wondering if you have a breakdown of how much of that is a retroactive lump sum payment, and how much represents ongoing costs in terms of the higher wages.
Right. Let me check my notes on that. Mr. Blakey, pardon me. So first of all, to point out, the Canadian Forces obviously are not unionized. The negotiations with the public service set a pattern that we've applied for the Canadian Forces. And these wage adjustments will impact slightly more than 120,000 Canadian Armed Forces members, both regular and reserve. The $331 million included in these supplementary estimates B reflects pay increases effective April 1, 2016 and 2017. And of this amount, $131.8 million is retroactive for that 2016-2017 period. The balance, $201.3, is for 17-18.
Great. And when there is, so there's approximately, well, a little more than half, I guess, would be costs that year to year are going to be higher. Do those kinds of pay increases trigger cost containment analysis on the part of Treasury Board or D&D when they, when they're in a situation that they know they're going to be paying more going forward? Does that trigger any kind of process where they start looking at other ways that they might be able to pay less?
So thank you for that question. The way in which we approach collective bargaining is that prior to engaging unions, we do analysis internal to TBS. We look at current costs, both salaries and benefits and pensions. Then we compare that to externally to the market and other governments, large employers. Then we will work with our colleagues in finance to develop a mandate or options for a mandate that are presented by the President to Cabinet for approval. And then, so that analysis that you're speaking of has been baked into the fiscal framework and the mandate that we currently have to bargain collectively with the public.
Part of the reason I ask is there's been some cost containment measures, I don't know what else to call them, on the part of the Canadian Armed Forces in the news this week about soldiers who participate in special operations and are paid a premium due to the nature of their work and the risks involved. And when injured on the job, the CAF has recently decided that those soldiers will only have 6 months to heal and get back to the job, and if they don't, then that portion of their salary will be eliminated, which heretofore was not the case. And I'm wondering if there's a connection between higher salaries and these salary increases and the Canadian Armed Forces looking to reduce those costs for themselves, and as a result having made that decision.
Mr. Blakey, I'm afraid I can't comment on that. That decision would have been made by Canadian Forces for their members. What I can tell you is that, again, as we approach collective bargaining, we look at projections and costs, and so we bake that in.
So is it like, am I understanding from you that that the expenditure management branch of Treasury Board, when looking at different departments and seeing that they're going to have an increase in salaries going forward, doesn't have a dialogue with that with that branch of government to encourage them to take other measures, or talk to them about what measures they might take in order to contain those costs?
Well, if I understand the question, I think, in fact, that is exactly the case, that we, within my branch, we examine existing costs, we examine cost drivers and pressures, we do a comparison to the external market, and we come up with a plan to seek agreement with the unions. And so
Have had any conversations from Treasury Board with the Canadian Armed Forces about making a decision, for instance, to terminate a pay premium to certain soldiers after a certain time in order to contain costs? Or is Treasury Board not involved in those discussions with departments on cost containment?
Mr. Blakey, I myself have not been part of those discussions. I can't speak for colleagues elsewhere in the Secretariat. We have an Office of the Chief Human Resource
Would it
branch.
be normal for Treasury Board to discuss those kinds of measures with the branch of government before a decision is made? Or does that come as a surprise to you? Like, do you find out about it on the news, or is that a conversation you would have had with the Canadian Armed Forces or DND prior to that decision being made?
I think it's fair to say that most benefit plans or impacts on compensation are discussed in some form or another with Treasury Board as the employer before they're taken.
And so is that the kind of policy that the expenditure management branch of Treasury Board would be encouraging in other departments when that conversation is had, or is...
What I'm trying to convey to you is that in developing a mandate, we try to have a full appreciation of the costs of that mandate, and so we would not, as a matter of business, seek an agreement and introduce new costs and then turn around and reduce those benefits or cut those costs because all of a sudden it's costing us more money. The costs are forecasted into the framework and are part of our mandate going forward.
So would the decision to terminate those benefits for injured soldiers after 6 months have been part of the discussion? Would that discussion happen at Treasury Board, or is that just internal to the CAM?
Again,
would that have, I appreciate that it's within a framework, but presumably the ministers at Treasury Board have information on the entire framework. Would that have been included in the framework presented to Treasury Board on this item or not?
Not to my knowledge, and again, I've not been part of discussions on this initiative. I think that your questions might best be directed to the department that made that.
And luckily, the minister will be with us for the second hour, Mr. Blakey, so you might have an opportunity at that time. We're now going to Mr. Ayoub. 7 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, if you could respond briefly to the 300,000 targeted immigrants over the upcoming years. Says a total amount of $196 million that was called for 2017-2018 in order to reach this target of 300,000 immigrants for 2017. As mentioned on page 112 of the SUPS, the RCMP is calling for $347 million for biometrics and also for screening of immigrants who wish to immigrate. So I'd like information as to how many immigrants were admitted to Canada for each of the last years over 2017 through now, and how many of them were in fact refugees, and what are the total amounts of funding requested by the RCMP linked to this mission of 300,000 immigrants.
Merci, Monsieur Ayoub, pour vos questions.
Thank you for your questions. So I think I will have to follow up with the RCMP to get back to you on those matters. As far as the immigration levels are concerned, for 2016, the figures are
296,346 landed immigrants, of which 58,435 were refugees. For 2015, 271,845 landed immigrants, of which 35,922 were refugees. And for 2014, 260,404 landed immigrants, of which 28,622 were admitted under the humanitarian class or were refugees. En ce qui concerne les coûts totaux.
As far as total costs to the RCMP are concerned, I do have the figures in the SUPs. However, for previous years, we'd have to follow up with the RCMP.
En termes d'augmentation,
But in terms of increases year to year, for the 2017 budget versus what was forecast, we're talking about $347 million additional dollars for the RCMP. That's what I've taken away from the estimates.
So, Mr. Ayub, this is $347,000.
yes.
Not million, thousand.
No.
Right.
I'm sorry,
Right.
if I said million, but 350.
Perhaps.
Maybe the translation, I don't.
So this is as a result of changes to the immigration plan and the development of new technologies. The RCMP has identified new tools, biometric screening, and some IT systems that need to be upgraded to allow them to accommodate this volume. And so what we're seeing is an incremental increase to their budget of $347,000 for this purpose.
J'imagine qu'on espère avoir une.
I imagine that you're looking for additional efficiencies and to process requests more quickly. We saw this summer there was a huge influx of refugees, and I would imagine the technology will help even more, but we can ask the RCMP folks that question. Let me turn to another topic concerning infrastructure and the Champlain Bridge, in particular in Montreal. There's been a request for $100 million additional dollars. Now, to quickly sum it up, this will be for unexpected costs. Now, I'd like a sense, even a list, of what unexpected costs may constitute and how that $100 million might cover the unexpected costs, given that it's a project of billions of dollars at the end of the day. Do you have a couple of examples of what may constitute unexpected costs?
Oui, monsieur. Merci pour cette.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for the question. In any major government capital project, there are always uncertainties.
With foreign suppliers, so we have exchange rate risks, there are interest rate risks, there can be inflationary risks in terms of employment and contracts. If key suppliers go out on strike in the middle of a project and they come back and we have to pay them more money, there are risks related to that. Then there are specific project risks depending on the type of project. If we are rehabilitating buildings, for instance, the Parliament Precinct, there can be risks related to lead pipes and old-fashioned plumbing. There can be asbestos. In the case here of infrastructure, so the point here, Mr. Ayub, is that for all of these projects, there are considerable unknowns, and so we would build in contingency at the very beginning of the project when it's approved by Cabinet, by the Minister of Finance, and by Treasury Board. There are known costs, and then there are certain amounts set aside for contingency to factor in the unknown costs, and that's just prudent project management.
Well, there is any planning ahead of those unknown costs?
We use our experience every year to improve the ability to anticipate unknown costs, but by definition, unknowns are unknown. We cannot, with perfect clarity, project, the value of the Canadian dollar, interest rates, what we might find when we,
Can we have the information of how much would be the unknown at since the beginning of that project and now?
Yes, we can certainly get that for you. What I can tell you on this specific project, Mr. Ayub, is that in the case of the new Champlain Bridge, part of the project dealt with acquiring land and buildings removed from the bridge Part of our costs here relate to dealing with contamination in those buildings, and I imagine that's asbestos.
Thank you for the information.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to our 5-minute rounds of questions, and I understand it's Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes.
Thanks. If we could just go back to the funding I was talking about, the training, the 75 people. What exactly are we going to get, or are they going to go through for almost $50,000 a person?
Yeah, so...
Like what type? Is it like an MBA type, or?
No, actually, it's a program that is focused on our senior management competencies. So depending on the level, we have different programs for the more junior executives and more sophisticated programs for the more senior.
Okay, what would be in the more sophisticated programs then?
Well, so our more, when you're preparing these employees for their sort of senior leadership roles for ADM level, so we're focused on the key competencies, and I'll sort of pull out the list. Excuse me, just
Maybe you can provide it to the committee afterwards so we can get to other questions.
And just, Mr. McCauley, if I could just add one of the reasons, it's not 49, we'll get you the exact amount per employee. There's 2 points I wanted to add that I didn't have a chance last time. First point is this is, as you know, it's department's money that they are actually spending to train these executives now that is coming, and we're centralizing and creating a standard program. So that's one point. The second point is part of the funding, and I can get you the detailed breakdown, is related to the performance management system that we use to identify these candidates when they're ready for this training as well. So part of it is there's a bit of an IT-enabled component there.
Great.
Okay.
One of my favorites with the estimates, and it comes up every year, is Department of Agriculture, where I'll read it: grants to foreign recipients for participation in foreign organizations supporting agriculture, sending foreigners to foreign agriculture conferences. It's almost $3 million. I'm curious, how are we choosing these foreigners to go to foreign agriculture conferences? And what benefit is it to Canada?
Mr. McCauley, thank you for the question. That's a very particular question on a specific program. I'm afraid I don't have the criteria by which the department...
You can get back to me how we're choosing from which countries and which organizations.
We'll direct that question to the department for their reply.
Wonderful. Yeah. Just getting back to a couple of things in the Treasury Board. The back office transformation, and we've discussed this before, this year, it's 11 million. How much more do we have to go? What's getting covered in that back office transformation, and how much are we going to spend when we're finally finished?
Yeah, so I guess it's very difficult at this point to talk about the total spend for the whole program. It's a transformation initiative that is involving 4 big back office areas of the federal public service, so the financial management systems and business processes, the human resources ones, as well as our IM.
Look forward to get back to the committee.
I could get back to you.
Wonderful. On the same vein with Privy Council officers, $32 million support the Privy Council's information technology modernization project and other organizational changes. I'm just wondering what the other organizational changes are. And is it under the same vein as the TBS back office transformation?
Mr. McCauley?
That's on 283 of Privy Council. You can get back to us if you don't know.
No, I've got it. Just looking for my note here. And so this funding supports modernization of their infrastructure, as well as implementation of a business continuity plan in the event that buildings close or systems are not available, to have alternate sites. This includes the system upgrades include developing what we call an e-cabinet capacity. So rather than all the binders that I have in front of me here, to have all this information available on a tablet, as well as the development of the GIC and Senate appointment website, and transition to a top secret network to be maintained by the Communication Security Establishment.
I'm out of time. Thank you.
Jude Drouin, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just like to get back to some of the the new estimates process and aligning it with the budget, and just because it's the first time that the government of Canada is embarking in this, it's the right method. I believe it was the right move. But just there will be a transition period, and do you foresee any cultural changes with departments or issues that may arise in that change?
Well, thank you, Mr. Drouin. You're quite right to identify the fact that this is going to be, a cultural change, a change in the way in which we do business and long-established practices. So we're aware of that. We have engaged our departmental colleagues. The deputy has communicated with her DM colleagues. We've engaged the CFO community. And so we're building awareness of this, and in so doing, we're identifying questions, established practices that will need to be changed. But the starting point and the reason that we are able to bring people along to this is because the status quo, as it existed, was, if not broken, it was overly complex. We were making the process harder than it needed to be to bring information to Parliament. And so by properly sequencing the tabling of the documents, we're bringing, I believe, some much needed clarity and coherence to the way in which, the timing in which decisions are taken. And that in itself is what certainly inspires us to keep going on this.
No, and I completely agree, and I know other governments in Canada have done this as well. So it is the proper thing to do to bring more transparency to Parliament and effectively to Canadians. So you've engaged with the CFO community. Is there extra training provided to maybe not the CFOs, but those who will write the documents, and so they understand the processes and whatnot?
Right. At this point, because we're focusing on the timing, the challenges for us are fairly straightforward, and there's not a lot of training required. It simply is making crystal clear new timelines and making sure that departments organize their business to be able to reflect those timelines. As you may recall, the timing was but one part of a broader reform agenda. And it remains to be seen, if or when we'll move forward with other aspects of estimates reform, such as, for instance, the introduction of purpose-based votes. Right now, we are presenting you information by operating capital and grants and contributions. If we were to change that around and present information by the purpose of the program, then we are into a world where there will be, training required to make sure that departmental staff are appropriately coding the information so that it's fed into the systems the right way, and that they are aggregating their programs in the appropriate buckets so that it is consistent with that which has been approved by Treasury Board. But that part of the agenda is for down the road. The President's been very clear. We have to get the timing right first, and then with the timing we can look at some other possibilities.
Okay, and just one quick question. I'm not sure if it's already been answered, but on slide 8, compensation and benefits, $1.3 billion, and the previous slide, we've got, I assume compensation adjustments would be included in there?
Right.
And then Canadian Forces pay increase?
Right.
And what's the third one? Because we're not.
Is the public service insurance.
Oh, public service insurance.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we've done on that slide, Mr. Drouin, is we've aggregated the spending by theme, and so pay and benefits is considered to be one theme.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. We are back to Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes, please.
Right. I just want to get to the lapsed funding. There's, I think it's 1.7. This came, again, sound like a broken record. This came up in our estimates last time about the infrastructure lapsed funding. I think it was, PBOS says 1.7 billion. Is that lapsed and reprofiled or lapsed and gone back?
That's lapsed and reprofiled. The commitments, the government's commitments to infrastructure are very clear, and in most cases, there's actually signed agreements with the provinces for these projects. Our challenges in the infrastructure space is that...
I know it's difficult to get out. The $10.3 billion that was lapsed in 2016, 2017, how much of that was reprofiled and how much is just lapsed and gone back into general funds, I guess?
Right. I'm afraid I wouldn't have that detail on hand, Mr. McCauley, but we can endeavor to get that for you. I think it's fair to say that a good portion of the lapsed funding is subsequently reprofiled because it remains for legitimate, programs and services such as infrastructure.
Okay. I just want to read just a comment from the PBO report.
We have that number. I'll check it.
Go ahead, finish it then.
Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, so the total we have for reprofiled funds that were frozen was $2.1 billion, give or take.
Okay. PBO's comment in your 2017-18 departmental plan, TBS committed by May 31 to include 100% of budget initiatives in the next available estimates, which we've discussed already. This would require the government to incorporate budget measures in the corresponding estimates over several weeks, over several months. Is that going to be doable?
Well, it is, that commitment is aspirational. It's what we want to achieve. We set a very high bar. Mr. Julian spoke to sort of the cultural changes. We acknowledge the need to work with departments and change understanding of timing and get them into a position where they can bring things forward quickly. We are working with finance.
How realistic? And I'm sorry, it's not a judgmental. I know it's turning a huge ship around, but how likely is that to happen?
Well, there was also mention of the fact that other governments have done this, and so we have looked at what other governments are doing. I was at a conference myself this past August in Winnipeg, where I met with provincial counterparts and better, to better understand how they are doing their budgeting process. There are a range of measures available to us that include more timely TB approvals and some other ways of presenting the information to Parliament. And so we are looking at those. We're studying those other alternatives, and it's part of our ongoing dialogue with the President and with the Department of Finance. So it's challenging. I would not pretend otherwise, but it is doable, and we are working our hardest to make sure that we can improve the process beginning in 18-19.
Great. Just going back to subspees, foreign affairs, there's $19.3 million for co-location in a relocation project at the Chanceries. What is a co-location, and what are we spending $19 million on?
Right. In New York, Global Affairs Canada has representatives both to the UN and to another office in New York. And what we're doing through this co-location project is that we're bringing those two offices together into one. So instead of paying two rents, we're going to be paying, we'll have a single property.
How much are we saving in rent by spending $19 million?
I would have to get that information for you. But there was a cost-benefit analysis to support this, and those savings are part of the justification for moving forward.
Okay. If you could get back to us on what the rent was and what it will be with the co-location. Is it the same amount of bodies all moving to the same larger building?
I would have to get that information for you.
Okay.
I don't think that there's a change in the mission structure.
20 seconds.
Oh, 20 seconds. I'll just say thanks for your time.
Thank you. We will now go to Ms. Hutchings. Welcome to our committee. You have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Great to have you folks here today. I'm going to put a little regional focus. I'm from Newfoundland, Labrador. And as all my colleagues from coast to coast to coast, the RDA, the Regional Development Associations, are very important. But looking at the estimates on page 7, by the estimates by organization, there's a huge increase for the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. It's about 14%, which is wonderful. And then when you reach over onto the InfoBase, the web page, which is with the website, which is great. There's lots of information. It's my understanding there's been a big improvement on that, which makes it easier for folks to, get the weeds of everything. It's not really quite clear what that $43 million is going towards.
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for acknowledging the work that we've done on Infobase and what a treasure trove of information it is. I would really commend the site to the committee. So 2 questions, I guess, or I'll approach this in 2 ways. First of all, in these supplementary estimates, we're seeing an increase in OGGO's appropriation of $40.5 million, and that's for 2 initiatives. The Innovative Communities Fund and the Business Development Program. Those total $23.9 million each. The Innovative Communities Fund is oriented towards the non-commercial, not-for-profit sector, more in rural communities, and the Business Development Fund is for the small and medium-sized enterprises, and it provides interest-free repayable loans. So that's $23.9 million for those programs. And then we've got a reinvestment of receipts from repayable contributions. So for instance, the business development program in the past has advanced money, and that money is now being repaid. And so we see a reinvestment of those receipts totaling $16.6 million as part of OGGO's appropriations. So that's the supplementary estimates B. Now, in terms of being able to follow this money in Infobase, if I understood your question, what we do is we aggregate requirements and we break them out by program, and we update this information consistent with supply exercises. So we started the year with our main estimates numbers. When we tabled the supplementary estimates in May, we updated Infobase to reflect that spending, and we would have updated Infobase 2 weeks ago to reflect SUPS B. Now, what we do is we take those amounts, those reference levels for OGGO, which are approximately $350.4 million now, and we disaggregate them by the aggregate programs. And by that I mean we don't itemize
Projects.
Exactly, exactly. Now, it's very much a work in progress. We've been at this for 4 years now, and I think it's fair to say we've made progress every year in terms of the granularity of the information provided. We're working really hard right now to incorporate results information. Departmental result reports were tabled by the President in the House today, and we will be, in the coming days, updating Infobase to reflect that results information by program. And we do hope to get to the point where we could follow initiatives at the most granular of levels.
Yeah, because we know better is always possible. Yes.
We have, our approach is increasingly more sophisticated. We've got a great team in my shop that's developing Infobase, and we are acquiring more and more data every year, more information that can be developed for that Infobase site. So it is very much a work in progress. I don't think we'll ever be at a point where we sit back and say Infobase is complete. It is almost by definition an ongoing project.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Time remaining?
You've got about 30 seconds.
Oh, just a very quick question. In terms of the way the information is presented to us, you've provided it based on sort of the size of the changes, down to you've highlighted those that are above 100 million. That's one measure of what's material. Another measure of what's material is which one has showed the greatest percentage change in respect of its normal budget, or also areas where the changes are due to projects maybe going off the rails or having unexpected. Are there any that you would like to highlight that are where there's been a large percentage change vis-a-vis the base budget that we should focus on?
I'll have to, Mr. Pagan, get you to provide that to us in writing since we are out of time. We've got 1 3-minute intervention left on this particular round that goes to Mr. Blakey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just in the spirit of following up on some regional concerns, in the Department of the Environment estimates, there's money for the Lake Winnipeg Basin program components, and I'm interested in getting a little more detail on what exactly. There's 3 separate votes that together total about close to $11 million. I'm just wondering if we have more detail or information on how exactly that money is going to be spent. Right. If it's primarily on research, or if there's kind of action items that might help save the lake, or.
Right. Mr. Blake, thank you for the question. We do have some detail on that, and as Daryl's looking to pull it out, my understanding is it's related to some flood remediation work.
Even if you just want to follow up in writing, that would be fine. I know it's hard to find stuff in the binder on short notice. Another quick question that I was curious about, maybe we'll talk about a bit about it with the minister as well, is there is money in the Administrative Tribunal Support Service for the RCMP. It says to support the implementation of a new labor relations regime within the RCMP. Can you explain exactly what the need for that funding is and how it's anticipated that money would be spent?
Right. Mr. Blake, there was a recent, as a result of recent legislation, the RCMP will now have collective bargaining rights, and so we anticipate a need to be able to deal with the Public Service Staff Relations Board to administer some of that collective bargaining process with the RCMP. And so this is funding to simply reflect what we anticipate will be some increased workload or volume as a result of collective bargaining rights being extended to the RCMP.
And so would that come largely out of like trying to resolve disputes where they don't settle something at the table, or is that okay?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Colleagues, we will suspend for a couple of moments while the minister and other officials come to the table. Mr. Pagan, thank you. And your officials, I understand that you will be with us as well for the second hour. But the other witnesses are excused for now, and we will reconvene in about 2 minutes. reconvene now. We're just running a couple of minutes over time. Again, I will remind all colleagues we do have another committee coming in here at 1 o'clock sharp, so we'll try and stay on time. Minister, thank you very much once again for appearing before our committee. And without any further ado, I'd ask you if you wish to introduce the witnesses and your colleagues sitting at the front with you, and then you have approximately 10 minutes, I understand, for your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm delighted to be here back at your committee again. Joined here by Joyce Murray, our Parliamentary Secretary, Yaprak Boltajulu, the Secretary of the Treasury Board, Brian Pagan, the Assistant Secretary of the Expenditure Management Sector, and Renee Lafontaine, the Chief Financial Officer of Treasury Board Secretariat. I'm here today to talk to you about the supplementary estimates. And with these supplementary estimates, the government is seeking Parliament's approval of funding to address matters of importance to Canadians. Il s'agit notamment des fonds.
I'm specifically referring to infrastructure funding, opportunities for Aboriginals and home care services and long-term care services. The funds earmarked in the supplementary estimates will also enable the government to adhere to its growth plan for the middle class.
Approval of $4.5 billion in additional spending for 71 organizations. As you know, supplementary estimates present information to Parliament on spending that was either not ready for inclusion in the main estimates or has been since refined to account for new developments in programs or services. Cette capacité d'exercer.
Now, this ability to monitor closely is one of the most important roles that parliamentarians play on behalf of our constituents. In order to do this effectively, parliamentarians must have access to precise and timely information regarding government expenditures.
With that in mind, Mr. Chair, we want to make it easier for Parliament to hold government to account. We are always open to the views of parliamentarians about how to go about this. For example, when I came to the committee in March to talk about Supplementary Estimate C, Mr. Macaulay made two specific requests about the detail and format of information that we provide. The first was to break down funding for horizontal initiatives by department, and second, to provide certain information in an Excel format. I'm happy to say that we have now delivered on both those requests, and we're working on more significant changes. To that end, the House recently agreed to change the date by which the main estimates were tabled from March 1st to April 16th. The date the estimates should be sent to the House by the relevant standing committee moves from May 31st to June 10th. This will begin in the fiscal year 2018-2019. Having main estimates follow the budget makes a great deal of sense, as I think there's broad agreement, and reflects practice elsewhere. In fact, having the main estimates before the budget, I think I said at this committee, was asinine and denied Parliament the opportunity to really scrutinize in a logical manner, properly sequenced the main estimates. So adjusting the dates will ensure that the estimates are more closely aligned with the budget. This will help members conduct more detailed reviews of the estimates and to follow the money. In fact, PBO noted in its report released earlier this week that, quote, parliamentarians will note that the government has decided to table these supplementary estimates several weeks earlier than usual, thus providing them with greater opportunity to scrutinize proposed spending. Ultimately, the more information parliamentarians and Canadians have, the more they'll be able to hold the Cabinet and government to account. Pour terminer, je voudrais vous rappeler que je suis.
In closing, I'd like to remind you that I am determined to work hand in hand with all members of Parliament to continue to strengthen the estimates process.
And I would be delighted to have your questions now.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you for your brevity. It gives all committee members more time for questions, which we will start with right now. Well, you may not see it, Mr. Minister, but I'm actually doing a happy dance inside my friend. We normally don't have ministers that are quite as brief in their remark as you. We'll start our 7-minute round with Madame Shanahan.
Monsieur le Président, puis merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Minister, for being with us here today, with all your advisors alongside you. We've already heard testimony this morning regarding payment or compensation adjustments for the public service. Obviously, this is an important item in the supplementary estimates B for this fiscal year. Now, these adjustments, pay adjustments for public servants, apparently come under collective agreements that have recently been entered into. But that strikes me as slightly abnormal that the item is so large in one single fiscal year. Can you give us further information on these agreements?
Call on a Form A.
When we in fact, came into office in November 2015, we inherited a bad state of affairs, frankly speaking, because the former government, in fact, shirked their obligation to bargain in good faith with the public service. Therefore, the onus was on us from that point forward to negotiate with the unions representing public servants. We were tremendously successful, in fact, because now, after a lot of hard work at the Treasury Board, we have negotiated collective agreements with 90% of public servants who are represented under these collective agreements. And it's crucial. It's helped us to establish a culture of respect once again in our public service. And we are going to continue to work closely with the unions representing public servants. At the same time, there was a large degree of retroactivity in the agreements because the previous government
there were, in some cases, 4 years of retroactivity. There had been some collective bargaining agreements. Il y avait des groupes.
There were, in fact, groups of unions that didn't have collective agreements for 4 years in a row in some cases.
Retroactivity, going back 4 years, creates a situation where you're going back, and if there's a pay increase, it goes back actually 4 years. So that created the volume, both of transactions and of the quantum of the...
Excuse me, Minister, are you telling us that this now adds to Phoenix problems?
Very, very much so. The Phoenix system doesn't handle additional transactions very well. It also doesn't handle retroactivity very well. So we inherited two situations that were difficult. One was a situation where we had a responsibility to restore a culture of respect with the public sector, to negotiate in good faith, to achieve collective agreements. We did that and are doing that. But then we inherited a pay system that isn't doing that which it ought to, and that is to pay people accurately and on time, and a pay system that does not handle either retroactivity or additional transactions well. So it was in some ways, a perfect storm of two converging bad situations, and so the extra burden of the volume of transactions created by the negotiation of collective bargaining agreements has added to the queue in the Phoenix system. And I know that my colleague, Minister Qualtrough, is going to be meeting with you, I think, sometime in the next period to discuss that. But it is, the situation is completely unacceptable, as was the situation of public servants not having collective agreements for up to 4 years. But we're working and doing our utmost to fix it.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that. And actually, on that note, there is a better way of doing things because these large transformative projects, IT projects that attempt to do all kinds of things in the bid to save a few pennies, penny wise and pound foolish, one would say, there is a better way of doing things. And we had some testimony a few weeks ago from Mr. Murphy of Agile. Regarding the agile method, sort of tackling things in small manageable pieces. So with the time that we have left, if you could talk a little bit about the TBS initiative.
I'm actually glad that your committee is looking at new approaches to digital government, and that's something I'd like to have a longer conversation with you sometime. Canada's government is not the first government. I'm not going to be partisan in this. Governments around the world have struggled with IT transformation. The worst U.S. digital IT disaster was on October 1st, 2013, when the Obama administration brought in Obamacare, and 4.7 million Americans tried to register on healthcare.gov, the website, and only 6 Americans succeeded in registering. It was the worst. It was the worst government IT failure in U.S. government history. But it was also the best thing that ever happened to U.S. digital government, because what the government did was reprioritized digital government, and they started something called the Government Digital Services Unit, 18F. We've recently created this Canadian version, the CDS, and it basically takes a totally different approach to digital government, including that of procurement and project management. And that's something I would really like to drill down with this committee on sometime, because I think it's something that all parties, members of Parliament, ought to be aware of some of the changes that other countries have gone through. And that's something your committee may want to study, because we're learning a great deal of what happened in the U.S., the U.K., Australia, even Estonia. For instance, and my Parliament or my Treasury Board secretary has actually been there recently to observe what they've done. They are leaders globally in digital.
And we'll have to.
That's another. I love that file though, so we can come back.
I'll take this opportunity, quite frankly, to give a little shout out to Minister Bryson. As I've told many members of this committee before, Mr. Murphy, who gave the presentation on Agile, had contacted me several months ago. After speaking with him for just a few moments, it became clear to me that this is something that I think that any government would be wise to pursue. And to his credit, Minister Bryson, when I went to see him about this and suggested that perhaps you want to pass this along to your deputies and perhaps we can get some witnesses in front of us, took that initiative under his own, and we've had Mr. Murphy here. I think Agile is going, so Mr. Minister, I think on behalf of everyone who was involved in the IT transformation thing, good on you, and I'd say that in a nonpartisan manner. I think it's going to be the benefit of everybody around this table. And with that, probably the last time you'll get a shout out from me, Minister, but nonetheless, we'll go to Mr. McCauley for 7 minutes, please.
Yeah. Well, welcome back, Minister. I'll let you know that Mr. Pagan took your glory earlier about arranging the Excel. He said it was all on him, against your best wishes. I'm just going to get back away from the partisan points, back to the estimates. There's CBSA, there's $1.6 million for funding to build capacity to address drug-impaired driving, and there's 5.8 similar line for the RCMP. I'm just wondering, when will that money get rolled out? We've got legalization barreling down on us very fast. And regardless of whether you sit on the legalization, decriminalization, or don't touch it, there is a lot of concern about impaired driving, how it's actually detected. Are we able to detect impairment versus blood level? How fast is this money going out? Is it sufficient money? And why so much TBSA and comparatively little to the RCMP compared to the TBSA?
Well, the 3 organizations will share about $20 million to increase law enforcement capacity to address the issue.
It's about $6 million then. Where's the other 14?
That's going to be the 20 million that I'm informed goes to Public Safety Canada, RCMP, and CBSA. And these will be used to address the issue of drug-impaired driving.
But the Public Safety Canada, I assume, is education, but this is actual enforcement.
Yeah, that's right. It's for both. I mean, it's a horizontal initiative that involves both education, but also enforcement,
But
including ensuring that
I'm
they
asking
have the tools, including the
specifically asking about
technology.
the 5 million for the RCMP. Like, how
required.
fast are we going to get this out the door? Because it's barreling down at us pretty fast. Again, this is a nonpartisan thing. This is
Absolutely,
a true safety thing.
I agree, it's very important, and in terms of specifically when that will be implemented, that would be a question that my colleague, the Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodale, would be able to answer. But in terms of the funding as it moves forward, we approve the funding that moves forward to public safety and RCMP, CBSA, and Public Safety Canada. Now, Brian has maybe more granularity on that.
Well, just with respect, thank you, Minister, just with respect to the public safety portion, training is a big component of the requirement, but they're also procuring equipment for police forces across the country. They're looking at increasing the number of standardized field sobriety
that's under the 14
screening
million
devices. Yes, they're going to be procuring 3,300 oral screening devices.
Can you provide that, as we're short of time, provide that to the committee?
Sure. Yep.
And throughout the estimates regarding climate change, funding for adapting to the impacts of climate change, there's 2.8 or 2.5 in Department of Health. It's spread throughout. How are we measuring the metrics of adapting to the impacts of climate change so that we know this money's going to actual public good rather than waste?
It's a very
what kind of metrics do we have to measure?
Yeah, it's a very important question, because increasingly, because of the effects of climate change, the increase in the severity and frequency of weather patterns as a result of climate change, we see communities across Canada being impacted. It has an impact on Indigenous communities, for which we're responsible. Has an impact on infrastructure projects, community emergency planning.
How are we measuring the success of the money that we're spending, though?
I mean, in terms of
so it's adapting to the impact. So how are we spending the money to adapt to the impacts, is what I'm asking.
Well,
how are we measuring the success?
It's an important question, but in terms of the idea with adaptation is not simply responding to the crises when they occur. It's actually preparing for the crises, including in infrastructure, preparing it in advance to be able to withstand these crises. And we have a results agenda as a government, but some of this, and Kelly, some of this is qualitative as well. I mean, in terms of measuring a specific result around increased climate resilience of infrastructure, some of it is quantitative in terms of indicators, and some of it requires. You're right, Yaprak. There's research. There's a material lab at Dalhousie University now, in which we invested, that is doing research now on.
It's just maybe a not well explained line item in the estimates.
But it is an important one, and I tell you, if you want to talk about adaptation, Kelly, there's
I'll just move on because we're very short of time.
But it's important too that we share best practices.
Mr. Bryson, please let me move on with my questions. Thank you.
It's a very good question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. House of Commons, we've got $2.7 million for funding for a strategy for social media, the modernization of the web presence. What social media are we doing for $2.7 million to promote the House?
Well,
and do we believe that's a good use of taxpayers' money?
If it's the House of Commons, that would be a question for the Board of Internal Economy.
Okay,
we'll move on. We are as a government investing more in social media. Okay. As a government, which I believe most governments would be, because we're seeking to reach Canadians in the way that they're increasingly seeking to
You'd be surprised to learn that's the opposite of what we heard in the committee from the advertising study. But
in terms of social media, we're doing more. One of the reasons why we're doing more, Kelly, with social media is that it's a two-way communication. The previous government wasn't as interested in that.
Thank you. Very last quick question. The hockey rink outside, the $5 million. Who approved $5 million for a 2-week hockey rink on the grounds when we've got so many issues with safe water, housing, everything else? We're going after diabetic sufferers, but we're spending $5 million for a hockey rink. And I know it's not you, but good Lord, who?
Well, I'd say you're on thin ice on this one.
Oh, well played. Well played.
This is a question I would take this to your member on the Board of Internal Economy. But
that's
I can tell you,
that's a fair answer.
I do look forward to taking my 3.5-year-old daughters Rose and Claire there sometime this winter and putting them on skates for the first time and having them skate on Parliament Hill as part of Canada's.
They're not skating yet?
Mr.
Oh, for shame.
I'm trying to get them into skiing because I don't want to sit in a cold rink all the time.
Well, good for you. We're going now to Mr. Blakey for a 7-minute round, please.
2 years late.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, Minister. I wanted to pick up on the conversation we had earlier somewhat about, the injustice for the public sector with respect to Phoenix and what it means in terms of the government delivering on its obligations to public servants under collective agreements. And thank you for your frank assessment of the failure of that system to do that. Your government has chosen to carry through a decision of the Harper government to deem civilian members of the RCMP into the public service, and the deadline for that is early next year, sometime in the spring. One consequence of that, presumably, would be that those civilian members are then transferred onto the Phoenix payroll system. Currently, they're on a well-functioning payroll system, and so I wonder if, given your remarks about the inadequacy of Phoenix to make good on our obligations to public servants who are doing good work, if you could commit to not transferring those employees onto the Phoenix payroll system until the issues with the payroll system are resolved.
First of all, and Yaprak will assist on this as well. The situation with Phoenix, and we can all agree, is totally unacceptable. We're working to fix it. The frustration we have now in terms of some of the collective bargaining agreements after having negotiated in good faith to see that the system is facing more challenges. I do believe that there's been a strengthening of the governance around Phoenix, the reportage around Phoenix, and we're making progress. But I think the
question for these people who currently are getting paid well and are on a payroll system that works is why they would be transferred onto a payroll system that, by the government's own admission, is really not working, and why the transfer of their payroll wouldn't be delayed until such time as the government can provide assurances that the payroll system will work.
I'm going to ask Yaprak to.
This question came to me in the last few weeks, and I asked exactly the same question. Because unless we can actually have the assurances that their pay won't be interrupted, there's no particular need in putting the employees in hardship, nor add on further pressure on the Phoenix system. So you're right. So I was asked that question, and that was my answer, and we're working through it.
Thank you. I'm very glad to hear that. I had written the minister on this issue some time ago and didn't get that clear an answer. But can I just understand from the minister then that there is a commitment not to transfer them onto Phoenix until such time as the issues with Phoenix are resolved?
We're working on that, and it would, as Yaprak said, that's what.
That's basically what my question is, and I haven't received an answer.
I'm going to take that as a yes from the minister unless he says no.
We have, there's a reason why Treasury Board Secretariat is one of the top 100 places to work in Canada.
Right on.
It's because of Yaprak.
I'm going to call that a commitment not to transfer civilian members over to Phoenix, unless you object.
I can tell you that if
I'm not hearing an objection.
We don't want to add to the burden of Phoenix right now at a time when we're still working through the problems, and it makes sense. It makes sense. So I would agree with your assessment.
Thank you very much. On another related matter that has to do with categorizing employees and potential cost to government, there's an issue for employees of Canadian Nuclear Laboratories who are looking at being transitioned out of the public service pension plan that they've been a part of for a very long time. I understand there's been discussions with Treasury Board with the Prime Minister's office as well as the Natural Resources Minister in his office about whether or not those employees would be allowed to continue in the public service plan. And my understanding is that if they did, there would be no significant cost to government, as it's already in the contract that the employer is responsible for providing some kind of pension plan. Can you confirm that there are no significant cost implications for government if those employees stay within the federal plan?
There was a decision made on this one to transfer their pensions. Very recently, I had pretty senior representation from the union, and I took on that I will get back to them. I don't have a good enough answer for you, but I will get back to them.
Okay. Have you done an assessment of what the cost to government would be in terms of allowing them to remain
I'm sure
in the plan?
the costing is done. I just don't have it.
Okay. Is that something you could provide to the committee in writing?
Can I just first figure out what we have, and then if we have it, we will.
So once you have it, you could provide it to the committee? Yeah. Thank you very much. Do you have a sense of timeline?
No, not really. I already have a commitment to get back to a union leader, and I will get back to her first, and then we will report back.
All right. Thank you very much. I look forward to that when you have it. One of the questions we got into a little earlier with some of your senior department people was about the money that's in the estimates for wage increases for folks in the Canadian Armed Forces. And I understand that approximately 2/3 of that is for ongoing cost increases. Now, this week in the news, we heard that the Canadian Armed Forces has made some cost containment decisions that unfortunately are going to land on the on the shoulders of injured soldiers, and particularly those who are in special ops and are paid a premium for the nature of the work that they do and the danger and risk that's involved in the work that they do. So whereas before they would continue to earn that premium if they're injured, after 6 months now, Canadian Armed Forces has decided to terminate that extra part of their salary for the nature of the work that they do. Wondering to what extent are you or is Treasury Board involved in those kind of cost containment decisions, and is there any relation between the fact that salaries are going up and there's a new salary cost containment measure being introduced around the same time?
A couple things. One is clearly, I mean, we want to do everything we can to demonstrate respect for the men and women in uniform who defend Canada's interests here and abroad. The Chief of Defence Staff is responsible for the administration of Canadian Armed Forces policies, and the Minister of Defence has asked him to look into this. So that's being looked into now. But again, the Chief of Defence Staff manages the administration of these policies, and he's been asked to look into this. So I can't give you any more clarity on that now, but it's something that my colleague, Minister Sajjan, has asked his Chief of Defence Staff to look into.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sadly, I think our time is at an end.
It is.
Yeah.
Mr. Whalen for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for coming, Minister Bryson. It's always great to have you here. Just following up on something Ms. Shanahan was asking about earlier, in the breakdown of the retroactive pay adjustments that, with respect to union agreements that weren't negotiated, weren't signed over the past few years, about how much of this $650 million really relates to retroactive pay from the previous era? Previous government?
YAPRAC has, I mean, it goes back. There's significant numbers because you have, as I said, we went from no public servants having collective agreements to now 90% in a fairly short period of time, and pretty much all of them, in fact, all those had some level of retroactivity, and some going back 4 years. So YAPRAC
So compensation benefits is $1.3 billion. $655 million is pay increases for federal public service. D&D, $333 million. Again, pay increases for the forces, and RCMP $65 million. The rest of it, the $253 million, is the employer share of the insurance. So you have to take, that's not collective bargaining, it's what we owe.
And what percentage of that would say be for the period of time preceding November of 2015? Is it broken down that way?
Mr. Whalen, we'll get you precise numbers, but it's approximately 40% is the retro component. And there was a similar question with respect to Canadian Forces, where they're seeing pay increases this year of $331 million. 131 of that was the retro portion, and $201 million is for 17-18.
Speaking of $200 million problems that we're left to correct, another one obviously is Phoenix. And when we look at Phoenix, something that's been raised to me is that with respect to retroactive pay, there's certain types of government retroactive pay, either is it acting pay or retroactive duty pay or some of these things. It's difficult for me to understand as someone coming from the private sector to understanding how this relates to bonuses, whether or not the types of ways in which federal civil servants are compensated after the fact are really transparent, and how that plays into the way Phoenix needs to be customized to address these really sort of unique government-type pay situations that I don't understand.
It's a very good point, Nick. We have, when we negotiate with the public sector unions, you have your economic increase component, which is fairly simple, and it's a percentage. And but then there are other areas where there are agreements around. Sometimes there's a signing bonus, particularly if there's been a retroactivity issue, and or there may be some other form of compensation. Every one of those changes involves a financial cost, but also a transaction. And so in some cases we would have, with a collective bargaining agreement, you'd have 5 or 6 individual transactions in addition to the pay increase. Keep in mind, when we formed government, there were 27 collective bargaining agreements which had expired with 15 bargaining units. So you take 27 of those. As we move forward, and with every one of those involving multiple transactions, it does put a lot of burden on the pay system, and there's no way around it. Public sector pay systems, public sector negotiations are complex, and the pay system as it is working now doesn't handle complexities well, and we're working through this. And I must say, Minister Qualtrough is working very hard on this, as are her officials and across government.
But just for Mr. Whalen, I think your point is well taken. When it becomes so many years of retroactivity, the transparency for the employees goes out, and as well for parliamentarians and for the government overall. It would be ideal if we can actually negotiate these things before they expire, so that employees can start seamlessly from one collective agreement to another.
Well, going forward, we look forward to you being successful in that endeavor.
No, but as we do that, it's a good point, because there will be less burden as we renegotiate or we negotiate new collective bargaining agreements. There will be less burden imposed on the pay system as a result, because there will be less retroactivity. So we'll get there.
Just moving on then to sort of the overall estimates process, it's been really interesting for us as new members of the committee seeing the evolution of, or new members of Parliament seeing the evolution of the estimates process. We know that your ultimate goal isn't simply to have the estimates tabled 2 weeks after the budget. In the past, you'd mentioned having them tabled simultaneously. Is that still a goal? Is this something we're looking forward, in a timeline of this Parliament or future, or is that it's no longer a goal?
Oh, the idea is we want in the main estimates as high a percentage of the budget initiatives in the main estimates as possible. And that's good from an operational efficiency perspective, but it's also good from a transparency perspective. In the past, we would study the main estimates. Your committee would study the main estimates. Then the budget would come out, and all your work on the main estimates would be rendered basically irrelevant. And so aligning them time-wise, the first thing is getting the sequencing right. After that, the departments, particularly TBS and Finance as agencies, are working very close together. Australia, I really like the Australian system, and they basically do it simultaneously. Over time, I really believe that the level of cooperation between Finance, Treasury Board, and departments will mean it'll get closer and closer.
Is it the departments who are going to provide the initial cost estimates, or is it our Finance and Treasury Board doing the heavy lifting on their estimate of how budget changes are going to affect their future expenditure?
I think all three. You have departments having their responsibility. I think in the future you're going to see greater granularity built into budget asks, so that departments will, in advance, will think through their whole system of developing budget asks, building into them some of the work that Treasury Board and Finance does subsequently in the current system. I think you're going to see a far greater amount of granularity built into the system and the process.
Thank you very much.
Seen from the new members on the committee today how important this is and how they want to see project-specific funding, because it goes to the heart of their question. So we look forward to that.
Thank you very much.
It also speaks to the heart of Parliament and your responsibility and to scrutinize, but also your authority over the purse strings. I mean, it's a good thing for any government, and it's a great thing for Parliament to have more clarity and transparency around
Thank you, Minister. Just a quick, if I may, a quick extraneous comment before I go to our 5-minute rounds here, and it actually was sparked by Mr. McCauley's comments on the impact of climate change. And my frustration has always been, because you're talking about the frustrations within government. Fire chief was in my office yesterday talking about the problems occurred during the flooding in the Ottawa Valley. And he pointed out to me they ran out of 70,000 sandbags within a day. So he started contacting, on his own volition, various provincial governments in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta to try and get other sandbags, because they had experienced their own flooding problems. Lo and behold, he found out we can't do it because we have to go through requisition processes through each provincial government and back to the feds. But one of the provincial ministers bureaucrats gave him a number of a private manufacturer of sandbags. He made a phone call. Sandbags were on the plane within the hour. Now, if your government can do anything to speed up the process that avoids this type of thing, I think we'd all be better off. That's my comment, and I'll stick by it. Mr. Blakey, I'm sorry, your time has been ceded to you by Mr. McCauley, I understand. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Mr. McCauley. Well, I wanted to come back to the issue of some issues related to the RCMP, and thank you again for your commitment not to transfer civilian members of the RCMP onto Phoenix before the system has been fixed. In the estimates, and we touched on this briefly, there is money, just under $400,000 to the Administrative Tribunal Support Service of Canada to support the implementation of a new labour relations regime within the RCMP. And of course, that funding is for what we could call back-end issues, or it's funding for when things go wrong and they need to be resolved between management and labour. I wonder if you could comment on the efficiency of. I don't see money allocated to help train RCMP management on how to successfully implement a new labor relations regime in terms of learning how to deal with the union in the workplace and trying to have good labor relations. And I wonder if some of the money that's allocated here for the back-end problems perhaps wouldn't need to be spent if RCMP management had training from outside their organization with how to do labor relations right. This is an evaluative judgment. I don't particularly expect you to endorse, but I mean, my experience through the process on C7 and seeing the attitude of RCMP management in terms of how they treated RCMP members trying to organize was that this is not a management that understands what it means to have a union in the workplace, and they're not really ready to work constructively with a union. Seems to me that some upfront investment in training would be appropriate, and hopefully means that we see less line items and estimates related to resolving disputes. And I wonder if you could comment on the lack of money for that upfront bit.
Well, C7 was groundbreaking in that it did provide for the first time an opportunity for the RCMP to unionize, and of course we want, whether it's in the RCMP or any department or agency of the Government of Canada, we want to see respectful, progressive labor relations. C7, as I said, is a significant step forward, and we would, and it will definitely it will definitely have an impact as you're now building into a regime, a labor management regime, wherein there will be union representation. I believe that in the last 2 years we've made progress writ large in terms of our relations with the public sector unions as a government. And
seeing these estimates is planning for when things go wrong. I guess I'm asking, when can we expect to see an estimate planning for how to make things go right so that you don't need money on the back end?
I'm going to ask YAPRAC to intervene, but one thing, C7 is quite recent, so there's going to be a lot of changes in the coming months and even years as this shift occurs. And YAPRAC may have some thoughts on this.
You're totally right. It's better to invest in good labor relations before you end up in a dispute. We will provide our CMP with support from Treasury Board Secretariat because we have a good labor relations group and we're the ones that actually negotiate all of the major agreements. And so we will be supporting our CMP. It's a culture change. It is a systems change. They're going to have to go through that, but it's not asking for new money. They have human resource capacity. It's just that how do they use that human resource capacity so that they can actually deal with a unionized workforce? Right. And we're going to help them.
So in spite of no dedicated resources or new resources, there are efforts being undertaken.
We usually like to see, people retool themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Money.
Fair enough. Just changing tack a little bit to talk about, sure. So, one of the things that happened when there was a clampdown on the temporary foreign worker program was that subscription to the international mobility program went up a fair bit. One of the issues with the IMP is that there's a lot less documentation in terms of workers' skills and also labor market demand within Canada for the occupations that they're coming here to work within. I'm wondering if some of the money that's being allocated, there's about $83 million being allocated to the TFW and the IMP program, will issue in or be dedicated to providing better data on workers that come in through the IMP, so that we know what they're doing, what their skills are, and and why they're being brought here, and why it was that the Canadian labour market wasn't able to provide for the positions that they're here to fill.
Unfortunately, we'll have to pass it over to Mr. Drouin, who may want to follow up on that question, but we're completely out of time with you, Mr. Blakey.
Yeah, if the minister wants to answer, sure. If not, maybe you can ask the minister responsible for that particular department. I want to go back to the rationale for changing the way we do the estimates process. And Minister Bryson, you've been around for longer than I have, and
longer than anyone.
You've been you've been in the opposition, you've been in government, you've been back in the opposition, and now you're back in government. Without mentioning years, I just or parties, yeah. But how, in your previous experience, how did you? Was there any efforts to make those particular changes? I know in 2012, everyone's on this committee has read this study. And the study was done, I believe the chair at the time was Mr. Martin. It was done, and then I'm just wondering from your experience, was there any move or any consensus built with all parties in Parliament to get this moving?
In terms of this, there was a lot of discussion around this in the past. I mean, InfoBase was a significant step forward in terms of transparency, but in terms of the sequencing of budget and estimates, I think that's something that we've seen a demand for a long time, and it was part my mandate letter. In terms of part of my mandate letter was to actually address some of the issues around estimates reform. I'm awfully pleased that we were able to get that done. Now I want us to make it work really, really well, and I want us to do more over time. One of the things we're doing now with the departmental results frameworks, which is going to be something that will enable your committees to actually have a better line of sight into what a department is doing and how it is doing, how it's achieving its functions, better explanation, better indicators to help measure the effectiveness of departments in terms of delivering results. I really feel very strongly about this. I mean, I've been part of 2 governments, but I spent most of my time here, and you were kind enough to mention how long I've been around.
I didn't say how long. I didn't say how long.
And so I have part of my DNA is, after being around as long as I've been, is I think very strongly of the importance of Parliament and of members of Parliament in all parties. Members of Parliament on the government side have a responsibility to hold their government to account, as well as members of opposition. And strong committees, provided with good information, transparently, is an essential part of a strong democratic system. And so I feel good about this. But so this is significant progress. And it's one. Brian's been around longer than me, probably, but this is within the public service. Let me tell you, within the public service, there is a lot of. They're as excited as you can be about things like estimates, but for the people who understand within the public service, actually are excited about having greater transparency and logical presentation of these, because they as public servants, they want to make a difference, and they want to be able to show that they're making a difference and to explain that they're making a difference. So I think this is good for the public service as well as for Parliament.
You've mentioned the DRPs, so I think they were presented in the House today, or okay, so they reflect the new changes that we're talking about?
Yes, okay. and it is when we have meetings with Treasury Board Cabinet Committee where ministers and their senior officials come in and present their departmental results frameworks. And the old system, the PAA system, was so complex and difficult to understand that neither public servants nor ministers really, it was really tough. This new approach is so much more understandable, transparent, and logical that there's a lot of enthusiasm with public servants around this,
ministers.
and ministers too. And it bakes in. We, it's good for accountability.
Thank you. Mr. McCauley, 5 minutes, please.
Because the minister mentioned his daughters, I want to take the opportunity. I know my wife's probably listening intently. It's her birthday, so happy birthday, Sasha. I'm gonna frame that from Hansford, give that to her as her gift.
Spend 5 minutes singing happy birthday to her. Yeah.
As much as I enjoy sparring with the minister over estimates, I want to introduce, please, my motion from December 8th that we put on notice. I'll read it out, that the committee invite the President of the Treasury Board to appear before the committee, provide an update on progress made, as well as provide a detailed plan to implement recommendations made by the committee to strengthen the disclosure and protection regime under the PSDA. Now, I know we're running very short of time.
I'm going to suspend for about a minute while we distribute a copy of that motion. Mr. McCauley, I just want to consult with my clerk. I believe it's in order, but I just want to make sure of that. Put their name on a speaking list. I obviously have Mr. McCauley to speak to it first. Anyone else? Mr. McCauley, it's up to you.
Right. Thank you. Now, I have to express my disappointment that we're not seeing more action from the government on this unanimous report. We all worked very hard. We had a lot of witnesses come forward telling us stories at how all governments, not just current, previous, but governments before that, have destroyed their lives for daring to come forward to be whistleblowers. We put through a very important document that was well received by a lot of the witnesses. Duff Conacher, I'll comment for him. Committee report was robust. Everything they did, we have. I said, if we put in everything they put in a report, we'll have a world-class system if we implement it. Public Services International rates Canada among the very worst for whistleblower, behind Zambia, Uganda, Serbia, South Africa, Malaysia, Kosovo. So I think it's incumbent on us to follow through on what has on our unanimous report, that we actually put some teeth into it. 25, I think, of the 34 recommendations we put forward require legislative amendments, so it's not just internal programs that have been suggested in the minister's letter to us. It needs a lot more than that. I assume that you'll put through a motion to adjourn. I would like to have a vote on this. I will take, and I think I speak for the NDP, will take, and the witnesses as well, will take a motion for adjournment as an outright rejection of this motion and a rejection of the unanimous report we put forward from this committee. Thank you.
Brief remarks. Seeing none, we will now go immediately to a vote. That is non-debatable. Mr. McCauley, did you care to have this a recorded vote?
I would prefer yes.
It will be recorded. I'll turn it over to my clerk to administer that.
Is this on the motion to adjourn?
On the motion? No, on the motion, on Mr. McCauley's motion. We're voting that, as the motion suggests, that the Minister, or President of the Treasury Board appear before the committee by December 8th and on.
Obvious, Mr. Chair, but I am here.
He could ask a question.
Should I ask a question?
Not asking
The
you.
motion, as Mr. McCauley has presented it, the vote will now take place and it'll be recorded. Mr. Clerk?
Ms. Hutchins?
Against.
Mr. Whalen?
Against.
Mr. Ayub?
Against.
Madame Shanahan?
Against.
Mr. Peterson?
Against. Against, Mr. Durand.
4.
Mr. Blakey?
4.
Thank you. That motion is defeated. Now, colleagues,
I can speak to this because I don't want I don't want Kelly to leave here mad.
I'm not mad.
he would never do that.
But I can speak to this.
Disappointed.
I'd like to speak to
Minister, if you have a couple of minutes, I'll certainly allow you that time.
Okay.
We do have to be out of here to allow another committee to come in.
Just on the Whistleblowers Act, you know, the reality is that under the previous government, they had ignored for several years the legislative requirement to review the act. And they didn't do anything with it. I do appreciate the question, and our government's committed to ensuring that whistleblowers in government have the protection they deserve, and that's for good government. We appreciated the committee's report, and there are useful recommendations to improve the regime in our public sector. And we're taking concrete steps, including improved guidance, increasing awareness and training, and enhancing public reporting. And in fact, last evening, I had dinner with some public sector labor leaders, and we discussed this. And one of the things I discussed was whistleblower protections. I told them that I want to sit down with the unions to explore what we can do to strengthen the regime. That's something also the previous government didn't do a lot, is sit down with the unions. But we're engaging also the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner. I want to sit down with him on this issue in the near future. And we're initiating meetings across government with heads of human resources to ensure that employees and managers are knowledgeable about their rights and their responsibilities in terms of whistleblower protection, and that they have the proper training and tools. As our chief human resource officer, is examining how to best enhance public reporting, so we're able to publish the data. But I want to tell you, this is an issue that is important to me. It's one that I know the committee has worked hard on, and I intend on sitting down with the public sector unions to discuss this further and what we can achieve on this in terms of strengthening the protection. So you may not have won that vote, Mr. McCauley, but you got your wish. I appeared and we had a chance to talk about this.
Well, I just want to respond to your comments. I am disappointed. I think public services disappoint you. You can say that you've consulted with unions. I think if you talk to our witnesses and everyone else, you'll hear that. Mr. Friday, I want to quote from him, Public Service Integrity Commissioner. I'm disappointed that the government's response tabled in May proposed no legislative changes. As I mentioned, 25 of our 34 recommendations required legislative amendments. That's not going to be addressed by your response. I welcome any support, yes. I'm disappointed the opportunity was not taken to make formal legislative changes to improve the whistleblowing system at this time. And I want to finish with one of our witnesses, David Yazbek, a quote from him. He goes, "The last thing I want to say, members of the committee, and it can be a little strong and almost emotional here, is that whistleblowers are heroes. They risk their families, they risk their careers, they risk their financial stability in order to make the operation of government better and therefore improve the lives of Canadians. This is not for the whistleblowers, this is for Canadians. The system, it doesn't work, it needs to be fixed. This committee has a golden opportunity to do that. I urge you to listen to the people like us and do that. This is not only better for whistleblowers, this is better for Canadians. We've let these witnesses down, we've let whistleblowers down. And I'm disappointed, and I think I share
On that note, we are adjourned.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
Here we are.